After some time away, the Spin Move iRacing Network is here to cover our Wednesday night series, the Ghost Racing Cup Series. And man, do we have a good one to talk to you about as they race at Indianapolis this past week. Let's roll the intro and get right to it. And welcome to our featured league post-race recap as we take a look at different leagues around iRacing. And for this season, we are taking a look at the Ghost Racing Cup Series inaugural season. And David, these guys have put on quite a show at Indianapolis. Say hello to the internet.
Welcome back, everyone. Good to be back here with you, Zach. And quite a show is right. Can you believe how close that finish was? I know we're going to talk about it later, but man, I am still in absolute shock of how close that finish was.
Yeah, fenders banging, beaten, and they are they really put on a good show this week as they really battled it out. There was some goodness gracious, I can't talk today. Last lap chaos, and these guys really made sure to get those fans everything that they bargained for this week, watching the Ghost Racing Cup Series, sponsored by Fort Worth Screen Printing Company. And it was really a great show. You can see our rundown here on the screen. We're going to take that away here, and we're going to get right into it, taking a look at the top finishers. Tate and Whitehead really battled it out there in the last few laps of this thing at Indianapolis, and even we saw a couple exchanges for the lead in 3 and in 4 and down the front stretch and all the way up to the start finish line where they finally made contact. And David, what was the margin of victory as these guys skirted across the finish line?
0.006. 6/1000ths of a second separated our leader, Mr. Tate, from Mr. Whitehead come to the finish line. So truly a photo finish here at the Brickyard.
Yes, and you can find pictures of the finish on Ghost Racing Cup Series Facebook page. You can find the broadcast if you want to go back and watch the wild finish there on well, it's through ESBN and our friends over there broadcast this league each week, so you can find the links over there. And really excited to talk about this wild and crazy race at Indianapolis that saw a multitude of battles all throughout the field, seemingly just guys swapping for position, and at a big wide racetrack, it really facilitated a lot of good side-by-side racing. None more than that last lap pass for the win. So, David, let's take a look here at the top finishers. Take us a rundown through the top 10. What are some names? We haven't covered this league in a little while. We've taken a few weeks off, and so let's get familiar with some of these guys up here again. And who do you see that is starting to emerge? Obviously, we got to start with that 54 machine.
Absolutely, and great point bringing up the 54 right away. Christopher Tate here, I believe, now on his third win. So a driver to watch out for. And I'm sitting here looking at the standings myself. And as I scroll over and take a look, kind of getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but I just want to mention it because he's not on our playoff recap coming up. Christopher Tate is sitting in 24th right now. But even back in 24th, he's only 83 points outside of that cut line. So as a driver that's come in, now has multiple wins, he is somebody to keep an eye on and is definitely going to be a threat as we have another 3-4 weeks here before we get down to that final race for the cut line, and then another 5 weeks before the championship race. I think that Tate will be in contention and will be one of those guys heading to the Final Four come that fifth playoff race, looking at the championship at Homestead. As I go down through the rest of the list, names that are familiar, a couple of names that have made their way up into the top 10 in these last few weeks. And let's just run down through that. So we have Brock Whitehead there finishing in second, Miglin in third, Ricky Gonzalez in fourth, Kyle Spees there in fifth, Bryce Cobbler in sixth, Trey Whitehead little lower than usual, running down there in the seventh spot for this week. Christian Ruse, a name that I believe, haven't seen too often up here in our top 10. Great to see him get up there. Charles Whitehead in ninth, and then Kyle Gartner rounding out that top 10, showing us that, hey, I might be consistent getting those top 15 pluses, but towards the end of the season, my goal is to get into that top 10 and really make my name known to solidify my spot in the playoffs. So if I had to pick a driver that I'm really excited to see here in our top 10, I think I'm going to go with Christian Ruse. Been on a bit of an upswing, downswing kind of season, and for sure to see him up here in the top 10, I hope that continues and that he continues to show his speed and stay away from all that bad luck he's had so far this season.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning that Tate up there in that 54 machine, he did not come into this season in the beginning where everybody else started. He started in a huge race deficit and has managed to claw his way up through the points, getting solid finishes and making sure that he stacks up those wins. Another guy that is that I'm curious about, David, to know where he's at in the standings is that 25 machine of Cobbler, because he came in a similar time, if I remember, as the 54 car into the league, and here we see him finishing in sixth.
Absolutely, and to give you an update on Cobbler, just because they did come in at the same time, he is back in 29th, which is 5 positions behind the 54 machine there. But the difference in the gap to the playoffs, the 54 machine being 83 out from that cut line, the 25 machine of Cobbler is 157 points out. Cobbler has by no means had terrible finishes over these last couple of weeks, as he and Tate have joined this season a little bit late. But that is the difference between a multi-time winner and a guy that's still looking to make his mark and make his name known.
So, David, you're the numbers guy. You're the guy who really crunches our points every week and makes sure that things are in order. Seeing Cobbler 5 points back, 5 positions back, I guess I should say, and knowing that there are 3 races left between now and the end of the regular season for this league, do you think that a guy like Cobbler is going to make his way into the playoffs? I think it's a foregone conclusion that 54 machine's probably going to get in.
Absolutely. And for Cobbler, I would say that it is a possibility. As you know, with our point system here in this league, as our viewers may or may not have already looked into, we don't run the usual points system where the first place driver has about 41 to 43 points, depending on what league you're in. That first place finish is worth 85 points, I believe. So it is a huge point swing, and then each position below that is reduced by 2 points as you start making your way down through. And then you add in the stage points, the bonus points, and just those opportunities to find those extra points. I will not rule Bryce Cobbler out, but he needs to stay consistent and really not have an off week over these next few weeks to make sure he finds somewhere in that, 16th, maybe up to 13th position there to secure that playoff spot.
So let's take a look here at the top 10 in points. We seem to be talking a lot about points, and really that's going to be starting to be the focus of our show over the next few weeks, where we're going to talk about the crunch for the playoffs. But first, let's take a look here at the top 10. David, who do you see up here making some noise?
want to mention again the 49 machine of Gartner. What a heck of a job this season. As we've mentioned earlier with these shows, this is a guy who isn't consistently hitting our top 10, but as you can see here, he has made his way up around that midpoint of our top 10 now. And as we make a push towards the end of the season, he doesn't have a win yet. And this is a guy that I strongly believe, we've seen it in other leagues we've raced with him in, has a shot of making his way into the top 4 without a win. Just point his way in and get there by sheer consistency.
Yeah, circa Ryan Newman back in the RCR days, driving that 31 machine, making it to the Final Four, not by winning, but by consistency. So it's a good story here if you're looking for a good underdog story. There are a few names up here that are worth really highlighting. Again, they are all still chasing Spies in that 36 machine. It is definitely a kind of a three-horse race at this point for the regular season championship, if you can even call it that. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure it's first and second, and then a fairly large-ish gap back down to third. But if with the points being the way that they are, nothing is yet off the table with having 3 races left here in the regular season. So, David, now we get to the fun stuff. Let's take a look at that playoff cut line for the first time here on this show. We're going to talk about the pinch for the playoffs as these guys are racing. We want to highlight here the 15th and 16th place car, as they are the two that are most in danger of being bumped out. And then I would say maybe the first 3, maybe the first 4, depending on points. It just depends on what I put in the graphic from week to week, so it just depends. So take a look here at the race for the cutoff line. David, kind of explain to us just how crazy this is.
So week to week, as you see, I'm down there in 19th right now. I have been keeping a very, very close eye on this cut line, as a few weeks ago, the gap was as little as 1 point between 16th and 17th place holding off this cut line. So as we continue to race out these final races, you'll see the gap maybe get a little closer and a little farther apart as names start to edge their way up above the line and then maybe fall back down below it. But looking at these drivers, even from 19th all the way up to 15th there, the gap is 31 points for me down in 19th all the way up to Mark Gonzalez in the 24 machine up there in 15th. So none of these drivers are truly safe. And then just above Gonzalez, you have another 8-point gap to the 86 machine of Leach. So really, even the 12th, 13th, 14th spots might have to start fighting over this cut line, especially when you talk about drivers like Christopher Tate looking heavily getting into the playoffs. That's going to push somebody down below the line. Cobbler, he's consistent. He has a possibility of getting to that cut line. There's 2 spots. So already those 15th and 16th spots, as they stand right now, might not be enough. So you got to start looking ahead, looking behind, and finding where these other drivers are that you expect to come up. And then also looking ahead and seeing, hey, I need this driver to have a bad week. What can I do to make sure I have a good week compared to that driver?
So my garage door beneath me is opening up, so there we go, it went away. So taking a look here, we know, I guess we can heavily assume that Tate is probably going to make the playoffs on the tear that he's on. Maybe Cobbler, based on his consistency, making sure those bad days aren't as bad. So aside from those guys, and we hardly ever talk about ourselves on this show, but maybe you talk about yourself here. Who's a guy that isn't one of those guys that you can realistically see getting in? Another storyline worth mentioning is that 24 machine, Gonzalez, he's not racing next week. So that's a huge point swing as guys are pushing up into that cut line. So, David, who do you see on the outside looking in, a name that, and you can throw in yourself, that has a shot at getting in?
So looking from 17 on down, a guy that I am honestly worried about because right now he's behind me in points, has a good chance of at least taking my spot if I'm aiming to only get to that 16th spot. The number 5 machine of Christopher Hubka. There's a couple of races he's missed so far this season, but he's down there in the 21st position at 41 points back, even with missing a few races. I'm sitting in 19th there. I don't think I've missed a race yet this season. I'm only 23 points back. You want to talk about driver consistency for somebody to miss that number of races and then be that close to the cut line at this point in the season. That's somebody that you really have to watch out for as you start making that playoff push.
Yeah, schedule management is going to be key over these next 3 weeks for these drivers. It's obviously it's real life, so you have to understand that there's limits. This is a simulation. This is a video game. This is something where it's really not as important as the real world out there. Some iRacers might argue otherwise, but regardless, you're just going to have to manage your schedule and really do that well over these next 3 weeks, because being there, chugging laps is key for drivers to get into the playoffs. It's really interesting and definitely worth a large part of our show today. So as we move away from points, let's talk about that wild close finish at the end between Whitehead and the winner of this race, Tate, in that 54 machine. We saw on the final lap a huge push down the backstretch. We saw a bump and run, so to speak, going into turn 3. We saw sizing up a leader going into 4 and on exit of 4. We saw side drafting down the front stretch. We saw contact, and then eventually we saw 2 cars really getting into it next to the inside wall for the win. And David, this kind of thrilling racing is very different than where this league first started. So let's talk about how awesome that close finish is, and then kind of open that up for a broader conversation over kind of the development of this league over time.
Even the development of, let's say, last week to this week, I didn't notice, or at least I wasn't as bothered by the cautions that were coming out this week. For the track to be as difficult as it was for these cars kind of early on, little bit sliding and things like that going on at the start of this race, that I anticipated a few more cautions to be coming out. And then as we got down towards the end of this thing, hey, we're having green flag runs. The leaders are up there battling it out, getting really close together, and that really continued on through the field. We were a little spread out, but there was those pockets throughout the field where there was just guys battling for position. And I even found myself in one of those spots at the end of one of the stages. It was a 3-way race for that last few spots in the top 10 to secure those stage points. And week to week, I think these guys are just getting better at understanding who they're racing around and who that they can really make those side drafts and all those close racing kind of moves on in order to find just that little bit extra speed right before the line coming out of 4 and running down the front stretch here at Indy, there's a long gap. So there was this great opportunity for those drivers to make those close moves and, hey, I'm going to be right there on you because I'm trying to defend my spot, or I'm going to be right on you because I need to get that air off of your bumper to slow you down.
It definitely was interesting to see. This is the coming of age moment for the Ghost Racing Cup Series, where we saw 3-wide racing. We saw at times 4-wide racing. We saw it's now at Indianapolis you can get away with such a thing, but they didn't wreck. And we, going back to what you were talking about at the stage break, you were three wide there for 10th place. That's one extra point. That would have never happened in the beginning of this league's inception, just because drivers weren't familiar with one another, they weren't comfortable with racing with one another, and now you're really starting to see kind of a more finished product from these guys, where you can go 3 wide for 10th place coming to a stage end, and it's all about managing when you do that. They're not going 3 wide every lap, they're going for points there at the start finish line. So really interesting. And then of course the win put on a great show where 2 drivers were just duking it out and trying their best to really pull off a win at a really historical track, a layout that NASCAR doesn't race at anymore. We don't race at the Oval anymore. So to claim, I won at Indy, big boy Indy, is pretty special to an iRacer, and to do it in a league makes it even sweeter, because you beat guys that you race with week in and week out. So when you go to the track the next week, folks can say, hey, that guy won at Indy. It's definitely one of the races we really look forward to. So we really got out of order, David. We talked about the close finish, and now on the agenda is the playoff pinch. I think we covered that really well. So we're not going to beat a dead horse, so to speak, but we're going to move forward with just some general takeaways from Indy. David, what are your closing thoughts here? What are you looking forward to in the next 3 races here of the regular season?
With how these racers have really taken a step back and slowed down a little bit here at the starts, giving people some room, letting them catch some slides, catch some spins to keep the green flag run going, I'm really looking forward to, as we start looking on the close of this season and into the playoffs, for drivers to make those green flag runs longer and longer. And then as we get down towards the playoffs and of course the championship at Homestead, I'm hoping that we can have long green flag runs there that then lead to those fuel strategies, the short pitting, and things really bringing themselves to the forefront as we get towards the close of our season. Congrats to our winners and everybody that is locked into the playoffs and those upper spots, and that doesn't give them a pass to just sit back, because winning you're in is not a thing in this league. But definitely some drivers up there that, as long as they keep racing, getting some consistent finishes, they'll be absolutely fine holding their spot up there at the top of the playoff lines.
Yeah, and I think looking forward for this league, we're going to really look forward to that battle for P16, and understanding that there are some hard chargers that aren't in, that are trying to be in, and a whole group of guys trying to fend them off. I'm excited to see just how hard you're willing to defend for that playoff spot, and a right to maybe have a Cinderella story here in the playoffs. It's going to be a thrill covering this league as they go through their postseason, but onward and upward, so to speak, as we move forward through the Ghost Racing Cup Series inaugural season. And as we wrap up today's show, until we meet again, my name is Zach, and for my partner David, we thank you for making this a part of your day, and to remember to keep on racing.